The afternoon sun hung over Prescott, Arizona like a hammer waiting to fall. Morrison Ranch, Arizona. Autumn evening, 1940. The sun was setting over the Morrison Valley, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. On the porch of the main house, old Colt Morrison sat in his weathered rocking chair, a small wooden box resting on his lap. At 85 years old, his hair had gone white as winter snow, but his blue eyes remained sharp. The same eyes that had seen war, loss, love, and redemption. Beside him sat a boy of 12, dark-haired and curious-eyed. "Grandpa Colt," Jacob said, looking at the box. "What's in there?" Old Colt opened the lid slowly, revealing 3 tarnished silver dollars resting on faded velvet. "These," he said, his voice gravelly with age, but steady with conviction, "are the 3 most important coins ever spent in this family." Jacob leaned closer. "They don't look special." "They're not by themselves, but what they bought, that changed everything." Old Colt looked out at the valley where 10 houses dotted the landscape, smoke rising from evening fires. "You want to know how this all started? How our family came to be?" Jacob nodded eagerly. "Then I'll tell you. It was October 1875. I was 35 years old, and I had just lost everything that mattered." Old Colt's eyes grew distant, looking back across 65 years. "It started on a day so hot, even the devil would have complained." October 1875. The kind of heat that made men's thoughts turn slow and mean, that baked the wooden planks of the makeshift auction platform until they groaned beneath a man's weight. Colt Morrison sat his chestnut mare Ember at the edge of the crowd, hat pulled low against the glare, watching. At 35, he carried himself with the deliberate stillness of a man who had learned that movement without purpose was wasted energy. His face, weathered brown from 15 years working cattle under the Arizona sun, showed nothing. Not interest, not disgust, nothing at all. He had come to town for supplies. Salt, coffee, ammunition. The basic necessities that kept a man alive on 160 acres of stubborn earth. He had not come for this. But when the whispers started in the general store, something had pulled him here anyway. Some instinct he could not name. The same instinct that had kept him alive through 4 years of war, through the hell of Shiloh and the carnage at Antietam. The instinct that told a man when to move and when to be still. Now he watched, and he was still. The auction yard had been thrown up hastily on the town's eastern edge, where Prescott gave way to open desert. 50 men stood in the dust, most of them ranchers and miners, a few merchants, 1 or 2 drifters. They shifted their weight from boot to boot, squinting against the sun, talking in low voices about cattle prices and ore strikes in the storm that had washed out the northern road. Normal conversation. The kind that filled the spaces between things that mattered. Then Silas Crane climbed onto the platform, and the talk thinned and died. Crane was a fat man, built soft from a life spent trading in things other men produced. His shirt showed dark crescents of sweat beneath the arms, and he mopped at his face with a filthy handkerchief as he surveyed the crowd. "Gentlemen," he called out, his voice carrying that particular tone of false joviality that marked a man trying too hard. "A rare opportunity today, something special." Colt felt his jaw tighten. He had heard that tone before, in army camps before the officers brought out the prisoners, in saloons before the fight started. It was the sound of a man about to do something he knew was wrong and pretend it was right. 2 men emerged from the building behind the platform, dragging someone between them. A woman. Apache. Colt felt something shift in his chest, some locked door beginning to crack. She was perhaps 28, though the hard lines of survival made age difficult to judge. Her black hair fell in 2 thick braids adorned with bone beads and eagle feathers, traditional in the old way. But what stopped the breath in every man's throat were the marks on her face. 3 distinct symbols painted in deep red ochre that stood out stark against her bronze skin. 2 parallel lines across her forehead, a small sun on her right cheekbone, 3 dots arranged in a triangle on her chin. Warrior markings. She wore a deerskin dress that fell to mid-calf, the shoulders and hem decorated with intricate beadwork in patterns Colt had seen before, in the crops of the scouts who had ridden with his regiment. Lightning and mountains, sky and earth, the old symbols that meant something to people who remembered. Iron manacles circled her wrists, the metal bright against her skin. Her wrists were raw beneath the iron, red and weeping where the metal had chewed into flesh. Someone had not been gentle, but it was her eyes that held Colt. Amber brown, the color of honey held up to lamplight. And in those eyes, no fear at all, only assessment. She looked at each man in the crowd the way a wolf might study a herd, deciding which were weak, which were threats, which could be turned to advantage. When those eyes found Colt, something passed between them. Recognition of a sort, not of faces, but of essence. Two people who had seen too much of humanity's darker nature and survived it. What we have here, Crane announced, grabbing the woman's arm and pulling her forward, is prime goods, strong, healthy, young enough for years of service. The woman jerked her arm from his grasp with a violence that made her chains rattle like thunder. A murmur ran through the crowd. Men stepped back. Hands moved toward gun belts. Crane recovered quickly, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. Captured near the Sierra Ancha Mountains, he continued. Speaks English, so no need for hand signals. Understands commands. He paused, that sly smile growing wider. Though I should warn you, gentlemen, she has a wild streak. Already killed 3 of Colonel Griffith's men. Put one's eye out before they manage to chain her proper. More muttering from the crowd. Nervous now, calculating. Colt studied the woman more carefully, noting things the others missed. The way she held herself, spine straight despite the chains. The subtle shift of her weight onto the balls of her feet, ready to move. The scar that ran from her left wrist to her elbow, old and white, the kind a blade made when you raised your arm to protect your face. This was not someone broken. This was someone waiting. Her name is Neshoba, Crane said, mangling the pronunciation, though you can call her whatever you like once you own her. The woman, Neshoba, stared directly at Crane as he spoke. Her expression was not one of fear, but of controlled fury. The look of a predator forced into a cage. Conserving energy, watching for the moment when the bars would open. Colt had seen that look before. On the faces of Confederate prisoners at Andersonville. On the faces of Apache scouts betrayed by their own people. It was the expression of someone who had already decided they would rather die than submit, and were simply waiting for the opportunity to prove it. Bidding starts at $5, Crane announced, scanning the crowd with desperate enthusiasm. Silence, heavy and complete. $5 could buy a good horse, a week's worth of supplies for a family, tools that would last a lifetime. For a woman who looked more likely to slit your throat than cook your dinner, it seemed steep. When no one spoke, Crane's smile faltered. $4 then, surely she's worth that much for the work she can do. Still nothing. Colt could feel the crowd's unease. These were hard men, accustomed to violence, to taking what they wanted from a land that gave nothing freely. But even they recognized something in this woman that made them hesitate, some quality that whispered warnings in the primitive parts of their brains, the same warnings that kept a man from reaching into a rattlesnake den, no matter how much he wanted what was inside. $3, Crane said, desperation creeping into his voice now. $3 for the work she can do, for the strong back, for the skills she could bring to your home. The woman's head came up. She had been still until that moment, conserving energy like a cat in the sun, but now she drew herself to her full height, which was perhaps 5'3", and looked directly at Silas Crane. Then she spoke. I would rather die than be owned by any man here. The words fell like stones into still water. Perfect English. No accent, no broken grammar. The voice of someone who had been educated, who understood exactly what was happening, who chose defiance with full knowledge of the consequences. The crowd went silent, shocked silent. This was not supposed to happen. The merchandise was not supposed to have opinions. Someone in the crowd muttered, "Devil woman." Another voice added, "Not worth the trouble." Colt felt that crack in his chest widen, felt something he thought had died 8 months ago begin to stir. Not quite hope, not yet, but something adjacent to it. Something that recognized in this woman's refusal to submit an echo of his daughter's belief that every human soul carried the same essential dignity. Lily had died believing that, had died trying to prove it. And here, on this wooden platform in the brutal Arizona sun, stood a woman who embodied that same unbreakable conviction. $3. The words formed in Colt's mind before he fully understood why. $3 was all he had in his pocket anyway. The last of his money until the fall cattle sale, which was still 3 weeks away. $3 that should have bought salt and coffee and the shells he needed to keep meat on his table. But standing here watching this woman choose death over submission, watching the crowd begin to turn away in disappointment that there would be no spectacle, no breaking of spirit to witness, Colt Morrison made a choice. Sometimes a man did not choose his moment. Sometimes the moment chose the man. $3, Colt said, his voice cutting through the crowd noise like a blade. Heads turned. Men who knew Colt Blackwood, knew his story, knew what had happened 8 months ago at the San Carlos mission, stared in disbelief. A few laughed, short barks of nervous sound. Others just shook their heads, already writing him off as a man gone mad with grief. Colt did not care. He stepped forward, pulling 3 worn silver dollars from his vest pocket. He had carried these coins for 2 months, through heat and dust and the slow death of everything he had once cared about. They were warm from his body heat as he held them up. Crane's relief was palpable. He practically lunged forward to snatch the money from Colt's hand. "Old," he announced, his voice cracking with the force of it. "Untold to Morrison." The crowd began to disperse. Some lingered, curious to see what would happen next. Most drifted away, disappointed. There would be no show today. No violence, no entertainment. Colt climbed the 3 steps to the platform, his boots loud on the wood. He moved slowly, deliberately, keeping his hands visible. The woman Neshoba tracked every movement with those amber eyes. He could see her calculating distances, angles, weaknesses. Could see her preparing to fight if she had to, chains or no chains. When he stopped, he made sure to keep 6 feet between them, far enough that she could not reach him with a kick, close enough that she could hear him clearly. "I'm going to remove those chains," Colt said quietly. "I expect you will be reasonable about it." Reasonable? The word came out edged with contempt. Like your people were reasonable when they burned our homes? When they shot children for sport? When they raped women and called it pacification? Colt met her gaze steadily. He did not flinch from the accusation, did not try to defend or explain. He had learned in 4 years of war that some truths were too large and terrible for words, that sometimes all a man could do was acknowledge the weight of them and carry on. "I can't answer for other men's crimes," he said. "I can only tell you I have no intention of keeping you captive." Disbelief flashed across her face, followed immediately by suspicion. Crane leaned in close, his breath sour with whiskey and tobacco. "Watch yourself with this one, Morrison." She put a knife through Jenkins's leg. Nearly bled out before they got him to a doctor. "And Simmons will never see out of his right eye again. She's vicious." "Sounds like they earned it," Colt replied evenly, taking the key Crane reluctantly handed him. He approached Neshoba carefully, showing her the key before he reached for her wrists. "May I?" The question, rather than a command, seemed to surprise her. She extended her wrists slightly, though her body remained coiled, ready to explode into violence at the slightest provocation. Colt unlocked the manacles with steady hands. When they fell to the platform with a heavy clank, he saw the raw, bleeding flesh beneath. Anger flared hot in his chest, a red surge that made his vision narrow, but he kept his face neutral, his hands steady. Neshoba rubbed her wrists, never taking her eyes from his face. "What game are you playing, white man?" "No game," Colt replied. "I have a horse tied at the hitching post, water and food in the saddlebags." "You're welcome to whatever you need." Men watching from below called out warnings. "You're making a mistake, Morrison. She'll knife you in your sleep. $10 says he's dead within a week." Colt ignored them all. He stepped back, giving Neshoba space, and gestured toward the steps. "After you." Neshoba hesitated, clearly trying to understand his motives. Her eyes searched his face for deception, for the trap she knew had to be there, because men did not simply buy women and set them free. That was not how the world worked. Not for Apache women, not for any women. Finally, she moved, descended the steps with fluid grace despite having been chained for who knew how long. The crowd parted to let them through, many hands hovering near weapons, eyes tracking the Apache woman like men watching a wildcat loose in their midst. Colt led her to Ember, who stood patient at the rail. The mare was a good horse, steady and strong, the kind that did not spook easy. Even so, her ears flicked back when Neshoba approached, catching the scent of something wild, something that did not quite fit in the world of men and towns and iron shoes. Colt untied the reins but made no move to mount. Instead, he opened the left saddlebag and pulled out a canteen, offering it to Neshoba. "Drink," he said, "dessert's unforgiving this time of year." Neshoba took the canteen, but did not drink immediately. Instead, she asked the question that had clearly been burning in her since the moment Colt had spoken up. "Why did you buy me?" The directness of it caught Colt off guard, though perhaps it should not have. Everything about this woman was direct. No wasted words, no wasted motion. Like the desert itself, stripped down to essentials. He considered how to answer, considered lying or deflecting, or giving some partial truth that would satisfy without revealing too much. Instead, he chose honesty, because no human being should be in chains. She studied him for a long moment, then laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. It held too much bitterness, too much hard experience. "Pretty words," she said, "but I've heard pretty words from white men before. They mean nothing." Colt nodded, accepting the rebuke. "Fair enough. Judge me by what I do, not what I say." Neshoba finally drank from the canteen. The water ran down her chin as she gulped, thirst overcoming caution. When she lowered it, some of the hardness in her face had eased, just slightly. "There's a trading post," Colt said, "run by a woman named Kate Blackwood, about 2 days west of here. She helps people who need it, asks no questions. I can take you there. And what do you want in return?" Weariness had edged her voice now. The weariness of someone who knew that nothing in this world came free, that every gift carried hidden cost. "Nothing," Colt said. "Once you're safe at Kate's place, we go our separate ways." And the suspicion in Neshoba's eyes did not waver, and Colt could not blame her. In her position, he would not trust a stranger's charity either. Would assume it was a trap, a game, a cruelty drawn out for someone's amusement. "I'll walk," she said finally. "You can ride your horse." Colt nodded, understanding her need to maintain some measure of control. To not be dependent, not be carried, not be in his debt in even the smallest way. "As you wish." And so they left Prescott, an unlikely pair drawing curious stares. The grieving cowboy and the Apache warrior woman, walking side by side yet separated by a chasm of history and mistrust. They had traveled no more than 5 miles from town when Neshoba ran. Colt had been expecting it. The moment they crossed a ridge that put Prescott out of sight, she broke into a sprint, veering sharply away from the trail and heading deeper into the desert. He made no attempt to chase her. Instead, he mounted Ember and followed at a distance, keeping her in sight but giving her space, giving her the illusion of choice even as he made sure she did not die of it. The terrain here was brutal: sagebrush and cholla cactus, rocks that turned ankles, soil that gave no purchase. And over everything, the sun. 105 degrees in the shade, and there was no shade. Neshoba ran like someone who knew this land. She used every bit of cover, moving from rock to scrub to dry wash with the efficiency of a wild thing born to the desert. But she was also running on empty. 3 weeks of captivity, of minimal food and water, of the body's resources burning away under stress and fear. Colt tracked her easily, noting how she initially ran in a straight line, then began to zigzag, using what little cover the landscape provided. It was the movement of someone trained in evasion, but also the desperate flight of a person with no clear destination. Running from rather than to. After nearly an hour, her pace slowed. Another 30 minutes and she was walking, then stumbling. When she finally collapsed to her knees, Colt approached on foot, leaving Ember ground-tied a respectful distance away. He did not speak immediately, just stood there, letting his shadow fall across her, offering the small mercy of shade. "The nearest water is 12 miles south," he said quietly. "Or we can continue west toward the trading post. Your choice." Neshoba looked up at him, sweat streaked her face, cutting lines through the dust. Her breathing came hard and fast, the body's desperate attempt to cool itself. But her eyes, even now, burned with that unquenchable fire. "Why follow me?" she demanded. "Why not let me die out here if that's what I choose?" "Is that what you choose?" Colt asked, To die in the desert when you could live and fight another day? He knelt down, not too close, and set the canteen on the ground between them. I served 4 years in the Union Army during the war. Saw things no man should see. Did things no man should have to do. He looked out at the horizon, at the heat shimmer that made the distance dance and waver. And I've been fighting my own battles these past 8 months, since my daughter died. Something in his tone must have reached her, because Neshoba took the canteen and drank deeply before asking, "How did she die?" Colt met her gaze directly. She was teaching Apache children to read at a mission outpost. A border skirmish broke out. She was caught in the crossfire. Understanding dawned in Neshoba's eyes, and with it, a question. "And yet you bought my freedom?" "I couldn't save her," Colt said simply. "Maybe I can help you." Neshoba studied him for a long moment, weighing truth against deception, measuring intent against action. Finally, she nodded. "The trading post," she said. "We go there." "You should ride," Colt suggested. "The heat will drain your strength quickly." Neshoba shook her head. "I walk, but beside you now, not behind." It was a small concession, but an important one. As they resumed their journey, Colt felt the weight of her scrutiny. He understood it was not trust, merely a temporary alignment of interests. For now, that would have to be enough. They walked in silence for miles. The sun wheeled overhead, brutal and unforgiving. Colt found himself falling into the old rhythms of the trail, the military habits that had kept him alive through Tennessee and Georgia. Conserve energy. Stay alert. Watch for danger. Neshoba moved with different rhythms, older ones. She placed her feet with a precision that spoke of a lifetime learning this land. Where Colt saw only empty desert, she saw a world of subtle signs. A track here, a plant there, the way the wind moved the dust. As the sun began its descent, painting the western sky in shades of orange and gold, Colt spotted a suitable place to make camp, a small formation of rocks that would provide some shelter and protection from the wind. "We should stop here for the night," he said. "Traveling after dark is dangerous in this terrain." Neshoba nodded, her practicality overriding any remaining desire to flee. She helped gather brush for a small fire while Colt unsaddled Ember and set out their meager provisions. As flames began to dance in the gathering dusk, Colt divided the jerky and dried fruit he carried. Neshoba watched him portion it out with careful fairness, giving her slightly more than he took for himself. "You don't have much," she observed. "Enough to share," Colt replied. They ate in silence. Then Neshoba touched the marks on her forehead. "These lines," she said, "are for my brother, Dakota, my twin. He died 5 years ago, defending children from cavalry." Her fingers moved to her cheekbone. "This son is for the children I have sworn to protect. 14 souls that no one else wanted." Finally, she traced the marks near her jaw. "And these 3 dots are for past, present, future. Who I was, who I am, who I will become." Colt listened without interruption, did not judge or caution, just heard her words and held them with respect. "You said children you protect," he noted. "Not your children." Neshoba's expression softened slightly. "Children of my tribe, many orphaned by your soldiers, by disease, by the reservation system that kills slowly with hunger and despair. After Dakota died, I began gathering them. 3 at first, then 5, then 10, now 14. Where are they now?" Neshoba hesitated. They were at the edge again, the boundary between caution and trust. She looked at Colt's face in the firelight, searching for something. Whatever she saw, it must have been enough. Sierra Ancha Mountains, hidden in caves high up, difficult to reach. 14 children, ages 5 to 12, alone now for 3 weeks while I have been gone. How long can they survive alone? They have food and water for perhaps another week, Neshoba said, strain entering her voice. After that, they must either move or starve. Colt stared into the fire thinking. The mountains she mentioned were at least 3 days' hard ride north, in the opposite direction from the trading post. Going there would mean abandoning the relative safety of his original plan, risking encounter with the patrols. Before he could respond, a sound from beyond their small circle of firelight caught his attention. The soft but unmistakable clink of metal against metal, followed by the quiet crunch of boots on gravel. Neshoba heard it too. Her body tensed, hand moving instinctively to her side where a weapon should have been. Colt slowly reached for his rifle, lying within arm's reach. "We have company," he murmured. The darkness beyond the firelight suddenly gave way to three figures, each holding a rifle pointed directly at the camp. At their center stood a man Colt recognized immediately, Colonel Thaddeus Griffith, gray hair cropped military short, mustache neatly trimmed. At 56, he still carried himself with the rigid posture of a career military man. "Well, well," Griffith said, his voice carrying practiced authority. "Colt Morrison, I heard rumors you'd gone native, but I didn't quite believe it until now." Colonel Griffith stood at the edge of the firelight, flanked by two younger men in cavalry uniforms. His face, weathered by years of frontier service, showed no surprise, only a cold satisfaction, as if something he had predicted had finally come to pass. "Colonel," Colt acknowledged, keeping his tone neutral while his mind raced through options. His rifle lay just beyond comfortable reach. "That's a dangerous Apache you're harboring, Morrison," Griffith said, gesturing toward Neshoba with his rifle barrel. "A known agitator and killer." Neshoba remained perfectly still, but Colt could sense the coiled tension in her body, ready to spring. "She's no threat to anyone here," Colt replied evenly. "We're just passing through the territory." Griffith's laugh held no humor. "Passing through? With a woman who's killed 3 of my men and incited rebellion among the reservation Apache? I don't think so." "I bought her fair and square at auction," Colt said. "She's under my protection now." "Protection?" Griffith's voice hardened. "Like you protected your daughter?" The barb struck deep. Colt felt the old wound tear open, fresh as the day it happened, but he kept his expression neutral. "Lily has nothing to do with this." "She has everything to do with this," Griffith countered. "Ever since she died, you've been undermining military authority in this territory, questioning official reports, suggesting my men fired without proper cause." "I know a bullet wound when I see one, Colonel." Griffith stepped closer, his rifle still trained on Colt. "You know what I see, Morrison? A man destroyed by grief, a man looking for someone to blame, a man who's forgotten which side he's on." "There are no sides," Colt said quietly. "Just people trying to survive." Griffith's gaze shifted to Neshoba. "Tell that to the settlers who've been raided. Tell that to the stagecoach drivers who've been ambushed. Tell that to the families of the men she killed." "Your men attacked me first," Neshoba said suddenly, her voice steady. "I defended myself." Griffith's eyes narrowed. "You'll hang for what you've done." "She's not going anywhere with you," Colt said, slowly rising to his feet. The tension ratcheted higher. Colt could see the calculations running behind Griffith's eyes. The colonel had 2 armed men. Colt had a rifle he could not quite reach and a woman without weapons. But Griffith also knew Colt's reputation, knew he had survived 4 years of the most brutal combat the war had produced, knew he was not a man who bluffed. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Griffith did something unexpected. He lowered his rifle slightly and sat down by the fire, as if they were old friends meeting by chance on the trail. "You know what I lost, don't you, Morrison?" he said, his voice changing, becoming almost conversational. Colt waited, suspicious of this shift. "My son, Nathaniel, 19 years old, died in 1870 at an Apache village near Santa Fe." Griffith stared into the fire. "They tortured him for 3 days. We found pieces. Just pieces." The pain in his voice was real, raw, and for a moment Colt could see past the uniform to the broken father beneath. "From that day," Griffith continued, "I swore I would eliminate every Apache, every last one, until there was no one left to kill anyone's son." Neshoba's voice cut through the moment. "My brother died too, my father, my mother, my whole village. But I do not kill children. I save them." Griffith turned to her, his eyes hardening again. "You save them so they can grow up and kill other men's sons." "I teach them to read," Neshoba said, "to write, to think, so they do not need to kill." The standoff held, balanced on a knife's edge. Then one of Griffith's men, a sergeant with dark skin and features that suggested mixed heritage, stepped forward and whispered something in the colonel's ear. Colt could not hear the words, but he saw Neshoba's eyes widen fractionally, saw recognition, followed by calculation. Griffith stood abruptly. My patrol reported signs of children in the Sierra Ancha Range, 3 miles north of here. That's where they are, isn't it? Your 14 orphans? Neshoba's face remained impassive, but her silence was answer enough. I'll be taking this woman, Griffith announced. As for you, Morrison, you're free to go. You haven't committed any crime. Yet. But as Griffith's men moved forward to take Neshoba, something happened. The sergeant who had whispered to Griffith suddenly drew his sidearm and pointed it not at Colt or Neshoba, but at the other soldier. Nobody's taking anybody, the sergeant said. Griffith spun, shock breaking through his military composure. Kane, what the hell are you doing? Sergeant Elias Kane kept his weapon steady, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. I'm not letting you take those children, Colonel. Not this time. And in that moment, as Kane stepped fully into the firelight, Colt saw what Neshoba had recognized immediately. The high cheekbones, the copper undertone to his skin, the shape of his eyes. This man carried Apache blood. The revelation hung in the air like smoke, thick and choking and impossible to ignore. Old Colt paused, his hands resting on the box of silver dollars. The evening had deepened around them, stars beginning to emerge. Jacob sat forward, eyes wide. Kane was the colonel's son? His own son turned against him? Yes, Old Colt said. But that's not the surprising part. The surprising part is what Kane did next, and why. He closed the box gently. But that's a story for tomorrow night. Your grandmother will have supper ready, and she doesn't like it when we're late. Grandpa, Jacob protested, you can't stop there. Old Colt smiled, the same smile he'd given Neshoba 65 years ago. A good story is worth waiting for, boy. Besides, you need to learn patience. Tomorrow I'll tell you about the siege, about 14 children who faced death with more courage than most soldiers, about your great-grandmother proving that one woman could stand against an army. He stood slowly, joints creaking, but spirit unbowed. Now come, let's not keep her waiting. As they walked inside, Jacob looked back at the rocking chair, at the wooden box left behind, at the 3 silver dollars that had bought so much more than freedom. Tomorrow, he would learn the rest. Tomorrow, he would understand what those coins truly meant. Tomorrow. Jacob arrived at the porch before sunset, eager and impatient. Old Colt was already there, the wooden box beside him, 3 silver dollars gleaming dully in the fading light. You're early, Old Colt observed. Couldn't wait, Jacob admitted. What happened after Kane pointed his gun at his own men? Old Colt settled into his chair, a faraway look in his eyes. What happened next tested everything we thought we knew about courage, loyalty, and family. Kane wasn't just defying his commander, he was defying his father. But why, just because of his mother? Because, Old Colt said slowly, sometimes a man reaches a point where he has to choose between the life he's been living and the life he knows he should live. Kane reached that point in the firelight, surrounded by rifles and choices. He took a slow breath. Now, where was I? Ah, yes, the standoff. 4 men, 1 woman, 3 rifles pointed in different directions. The mathematics of survival calculated in fractions of seconds in the steadiness of trigger fingers. Colonel Thaddeus Griffith stood at the edge of the firelight, flanked by 2 younger men in cavalry uniforms. At 56, he retained the ramrod posture and commanding presence that had earned him respect during the war. His gray hair was cropped short beneath his campaign hat, his mustache neatly trimmed above a mouth that had forgotten how to smile. Sergeant Kane, lower your weapon. That's an order. The words carried the weight of 30 years of military authority. But Sergeant Elias Kane did not lower his pistol. Instead, he kept it trained on the other soldier, a frightened private who could not have been more than 20 years old. No, sir, Kane replied, his voice remarkably steady for a man committing career suicide. I won't be part of hunting children anymore. Griffith's face darkened. You're throwing away your career, your pension, everything you've worked for. I'm saving my soul, Kane said quietly. Colt watched this unfold with the detached clarity that 4 years of combat had taught him. He noted the positions of each man, the distance to his rifle, the angle of moonlight that would make accurate shooting difficult. The young private's shaking hands, which made him the most dangerous element in this equation. Frightened men with guns killed more people than angry ones. Neshoba remained perfectly still beside him, but Colt could sense the coiled tension in her body. She was reading the situation too, calculating her own mathematics of violence and survival. Kane, Griffith said, and now something else entered his voice. Not just authority, but something almost pleading, something human beneath the uniform. Don't do this. Not for them. Not for them, Kane agreed, his dark eyes never leaving the colonel. For my mother. For what you did to her. The words fell like stones into deep water. Ripples of shock spread across Griffith's face, followed by something that might have been pain. Neshoba's voice cut through the moment, sharp and clear as a blade. Elias Kane, son of Morning Star, son of the woman who loved a soldier who was too ashamed to love her back. Kane flinched as if struck. The young private's rifle wavered, confusion breaking his military discipline. Griffith's hand tightened on his own weapon until his knuckles showed white. How dare you speak of things you know nothing about, Griffith said, but the words lacked conviction. I know everything, Neshoba replied, her voice carrying the weight of truth that could not be denied. I knew Morning Star, before she went with you, before you hid her like a shameful secret, before you let her die rather than take her to a white doctor because you feared what people would say. The accusation hung in the air like smoke, thick and choking and impossible to ignore. Griffith seemed to age 10 years in 10 seconds. His shoulders sagged slightly, his rifle lowered just a fraction. I loved her, he said, and his voice was barely above a whisper. God help me, I loved her. But not enough, Kane said, and now his voice shook with decades of suppressed rage. Rage at his father, rage at himself, rage at a world that made love a matter of shame. Not enough to claim her in daylight. Not enough to save her when she bled out giving birth to me. Not enough to raise me as anything but your dirty secret. I did the best I could, Griffith protested, but the words were hollow. They both knew it. Your best left my mother dead and me hating half of what I am, Kane said. That's not good enough. Not anymore. Colt could see the moment Griffith's military composure began to crack. Could see the man beneath the uniform, the father beneath the colonel, struggling with guilt that had festered for 28 years. Kane, Colt said quietly, drawing the sergeant's attention without making any sudden movements. Lower the gun. This isn't the way. There is no other way, Kane replied, but doubt had crept into his voice. He'll never stop. Never let those children be. Never let anyone with Apache blood live in peace. Then we find another way that doesn't end with someone dead, Colt said, his voice carrying the calm authority of a man who had led soldiers through hell and brought them out the other side. Your mother wouldn't want this. Wouldn't want you to become what you hate. It was a guess, but a calculated one, and it struck home. Kane's hand trembled, his aim wavered. Griffith seized the moment, his military instincts overriding personal anguish. Stand down, Sergeant. All of you, that's an order. The young private immediately lowered his rifle, relief flooding his face. He had joined the army to see adventure, not to watch men he served with turn guns on each other. Kane hesitated for a long moment. Then slowly he lowered his pistol, but he did not holster it, did not surrender it, just held it loose at his side, ready to raise again if needed. I won't help you hunt children, Kane said, his voice steady again. Court-martial me if you want. But I'm done, Colonel. I'm done being ashamed of who I am. I'm done pretending that killing people who look like my mother somehow makes me more acceptable to people who will never accept me anyway. Griffith studied his son for a long moment. In the firelight, Colt could see the resemblance he had missed before. The high cheekbones, the shape of the eyes, the copper undertone to Kane's skin that spoke of mixed heritage. When Griffith spoke again, his voice carried a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. Those children Neshoba spoke of, the 14 in the mountains, are they real? Neshoba said nothing. Answer me, Tresim, Griffith demanded, but the command lacked force. Are there 14 Apache children hiding in the Sierra Ancha? What does it matter to you, Wabam? Colt asked, stepping forward slightly, drawing Griffith's attention away from Neshoba. They're children, 5 to 12 years old. They're no threat to anyone. They will be, Griffith said, but the conviction had drained from his words. They grow up, they become warriors, they kill. The cycle continues. Or they grow up educated, Colt countered, able to live in both worlds, able to choose peace over war. The cycle breaks. You sound like my wife, Griffith said, and now pain cracked through his voice like lightning through dark clouds. She believed that too, believed that understanding could bridge any divide, that her people and mine could find into common ground. She was right, Neshoba said quietly. She was naive, Griffith replied, and she's dead. Just like your daughter is dead, Morrison. Just like every idealist who thinks the world can be changed with good intentions and kind words. The bitterness in his voice was corrosive, the bitterness of a man who had lost everything that mattered and blamed the world for his own failures. My daughter died trying to prove that understanding was possible, Colt said, his own voice hard now. She died because men like you prefer killing to learning, because orders matter more than lives, because it's easier to pull a trigger than to have a conversation. Your daughter died because she was in the wrong place at the wrong instant, Griffith shot back. Because war doesn't care about intentions. Because the world is harder and crueler than young idealists understand. She died because Private Webb over there, Colt gestured toward the young soldier, pulled a trigger when you ordered him to fire into a mission filled with children. Don't dress it up as fate, or bad luck, or the cruelty of the world. She died because you gave a scared kid an order, and he followed it. The young private, Webb, made a strangled sound. His face had gone white in the moonlight. Sir, I didn't know, Webb said, his voice breaking. I swear I didn't know there were children inside. You said Apache raiders were using it as a base. You said to fire at will. Griffith's jaw tightened. You followed orders, Private. That's what soldiers do. I killed a girl, Webb said, and now tears were running down his face. 16 years old, teaching kids to read. I've seen her in my dreams every night for 8 months. I can't make it stop. The confession hung in the air. Raw, honest, devastating. Colt felt something shift in his chest. For 8 months, he had carried rage at a faceless killer, had imagined confronting the man who took Lily from him, had dreamed of vengeance in all its violent forms. But looking at Webb now, seeing the genuine anguish on the young man's face, seeing the weight of guilt that bowed his shoulders and hollowed his eyes, Colt felt the rage drain away. Not disappear. That would never happen. But transform into something else. Something closer to pity. I'm sorry, Webb said, looking directly at Colt now. I know it doesn't help. I know it doesn't bring her back, but I'm sorry. I would take it back if I could. I would trade places with her if I could. Colt stood very still, felt Neshoba's hand touch his arm lightly, felt the night air cool on his face, felt the weight of a choice pressing down on him. He could kill this boy, could draw his pistol and put a bullet through Webb's heart, and no one would blame him. Least of all Webb himself, who clearly wanted death as penance for what he had done. Or he could do what Lily would have wanted, what she had believed in even as she died. What's your first name, Private? Colt asked. Lucas, sir. Lucas Webb. Lucas Webb, Colt repeated, tasting the name. You want to make amends for what you did? Webb nodded frantically. Yes, sir. Anything. I'll do anything. Then help me save the children my daughter died trying to teach. Help me prove that her death wasn't meaningless, that something good can come from it. Webb stared at him in disbelief. You would trust me after what I did? My daughter believed every person deserved a chance at redemption, Colt said. I aim to honor that belief, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Griffith made a sound of disgust. Touching, very touching, but I still have orders. Bring all Apache to the reservation. All of them, including children. Then change your orders, Kane said. You're a colonel, you have discretion. I have a career to salvage, Griffith countered. After the inquiry into the mission incident, I'm already on thin ice. Another failure and I'm finished. So it's about your career, Colt said flatly. 14 children's lives versus your rank and pension. It's about duty, Griffith insisted, but he could not meet Colt's eyes. It's about maintaining order, about following the chain of command. It's about cowardice, Neshoba said, her voice cutting, about a man too weak to stand up for what he knows is right. Griffith's face flushed with anger. I've spent 30 years in uniform. Don't talk to me about weakness. 30 years hiding behind orders, Neshoba replied. hiding behind duty and regulations and the chain of command so you never have to take responsibility for your choices. You let Morningstar die because claiming her would damage your career. Now you'll let 14 children die for the same reason. The truth of it struck Griffith like a physical blow. He actually staggered back a step. "I'll give you 48 hours, he said finally, his voice hollow. 2 days. Bring the woman to Fort Whipple voluntarily. She'll get a fair trial, lawyer, everything legal and proper." "And the children?" Colt asked. "I don't know where they are," Griffith said, each word forced out. "Therefore, I can't report their location. 2 days to find them, whoever hypothetically might be looking." It was as close to help as Griffith could offer without completely abandoning his duty, a compromise born of guilt and grief and the ghost of a dead Apache wife whispering in his memory. "After 48 hours, Griffith continued, his command voice returning, "if you're not at Fort Whipple, I come looking, and when I come, I bring enough men to do the job properly." "Understood?" Colt nodded. "Understood." Griffith turned to leave, his 2 soldiers falling in behind him. But Kane remained. "Sergeant," Griffith said, pausing. "I'm not coming, sir," Kane replied. "I'm done with the Army." For a moment, something that might have been regret crossed Griffith's face, but military discipline crushed it. "So be it. You're absent without leave as of now. If I see you again, you'll be arrested." "Yes, sir," Kane said, and there was finality in those words. The severing of ties that could never be restored. Griffith and his 2 soldiers melted back into the darkness. The sound of their horses faded gradually into the night. When silence returned, the 3 people around the fire let out breath they had not realized they were holding. Kane sat down heavily, as if his legs would no longer support him. "That's it then," he said quietly. 30 years old and I've thrown away the only life I've ever known." "No," Neshoba said, her voice gentler now. "You found the life you were meant for, the one your mother would be proud of." "You said you knew her," Kane said, looking up at Neshoba with desperate hope. "Morningstar. Can you tell me about her?" He never would. Neshoba sat down across from him. She was Mescalero Apache, born in the Sacramento Mountains. She was called Morning Star because she was born just before dawn, when the morning star still hung in the sky. She was known for her kindness, for her healing skills, for her belief that peace between peoples was possible. She paused, her own memories clearly painful. "When she met your father, she thought she had found proof of that belief. A soldier who saw her as a person, not an enemy, who loved her, or said he did." "Did he?" Kane asked. "Really love her?" "I think so," Neshoba said slowly. "In his way, but he loved his career more, loved his reputation more, loved being acceptable to white society more. And so he hid her, kept her like a secret shame. And when she needed him most, when she was dying giving birth to you, he would not risk his position by taking her to a doctor who might have saved her." Kane's hands clenched into fists. "How did you know all this?" "Because I was there," Neshoba said. 14 years old, learning healing from the women. I held her hand as she died. I heard her last words." "What did she say?" "She said to tell her son, when he was old enough to understand, that she loved him, that she hoped he would be strong enough to be both Apache and white, to take the best of both worlds and leave the worst behind." Tears ran down Kane's face, catching the firelight. "I've spent my whole life trying to be white enough," he said, "trying to prove I belonged, trying to make him proud, and all I did was dishonor her memory." "No," Neshoba said firmly. "Today you honored it. Today you chose children over career, truth over lies. That's what she would have wanted." Colt had been silent through this exchange, but now he spoke. "We have 48 hours. We need to use them. Can we reach the children before Griffith's deadline?" 3 days to ride there," Neshoba said. 2 if we push hard and don't stop." "Then we don't stop," Colt decided. Kane looked up, wiping his face. "We?" "You helped us," Colt said. "That makes you part of this. Besides, we need you. You know how Griffith thinks, how the cavalry operates. That's valuable." Kane nodded slowly. "What about Private Webb? Think he meant what he said?" Colt considered. "I think he's drowning in guilt and would grab any lifeline offered. Whether that translates to real help, We'll see. They broke camp immediately. No sleep, no rest. Just the desperate mathematics of time and distance. 48 hours to reach 14 children, get them to safety, and somehow avoid both starvation and cavalry patrols. The first night passed in a blur of motion. Neshoba led them along trails that existed only in her memory and the subtle reading of land that came from a lifetime learning the desert's secrets. Colt followed, his cavalry experience making him comfortable with long night rides even on unfamiliar terrain. Kane brought up the rear, his own military training valuable despite his conflicted loyalties. They stopped only to water the horses and allow them brief rest. No fires, no conversation beyond the necessary exchange of information. Just the hard work of miles consumed one after another in the darkness. As dawn broke on the second day, painting the eastern sky in shades of rose and gold, they reached the foothills of the Sierra Ancha Range. The terrain shifted from desert to something more complex. Juniper and pinyon pine appeared, hardy survivors clinging to rocky soil. The air carried a different quality here. Cooler, thinner, the smell of stone and growing things instead of just dust and heat. Neshoba called a halt near a small stream that ran clear over smooth rocks. "The horses need longer rest," she said, "and we need to talk about approach." They watered the animals and let them graze on the tough mountain grass while the three humans gathered around Neshoba's simple map scratched in the dirt with a stick. "The main entrance to the caves is here," she indicated a spot on the eastern face of a prominent peak. Large, visible from below, easy to find for anyone looking. Griffith's men will discover it quickly once they start searching in earnest. "Is there another way in?" Colt asked, studying the crude map. "Yes, known only to my brother Dakota and me. We used it as children when we needed to hide from the elders after some mischief." She drew another line in the dirt, representing a different approach. "Here, on the western face, very difficult, very dangerous. Narrow passages barely wide enough for an adult, but it opens into the same cave system." Kane studied the map with a tactical eye. "How narrow are we talking?" "An adult can fit if they turn sideways and don't breathe too deep. Children pass through easily. My brother and I used it many times growing up." "Then that's our way in," Colt said. "We approach from the west, use your secret entrance, get the children, and evacuate them through the same route before Griffith arrives." "But 14 children cannot move quickly through such passages," Neshoba pointed out, "especially the youngest ones. And one is very sick." Her voice caught slightly on the last words. "How sick?" Colt asked, concern sharpening his voice. "Fever, cough that brings blood sometimes, for 3 days now, maybe 4. Halona, she is 6 years old, strong normally, but this sickness is stronger." Colt thought of the medical supplies in his saddlebag, the quinine tablets, the laudanum for pain, the basic remedies every frontier man carried because doctors were scarce and death was common. Would it be enough for a child who had been sick for days? "We do what we can with what we have," he said. "First priority is getting to them. Then we assess Halona's condition and treat her as best we can. Then we figure out how to move everyone to safety." Kane pulled a small bundle wrapped in oilcloth from his own pack. "Extra quinine, son," he said, "and some willow bark, camphor, things my mother used when I was sick as a child. I've carried them for years. Never knew why. Maybe for this." Neshoba looked at him with something approaching warmth. "You planned to help even before last night." "I've been planning to desert for months," Kane admitted. "Just needed the right reason, the right moment. Couldn't abandon those kids once I knew they were out here alone." They rested for 2 hours, long enough for the horses to recover some strength and for the humans to eat a cold meal of jerky and hardtack. Not long enough for anyone to truly rest. The weight of urgency of 14 lives depending on their speed pressed too heavily. When they resumed, the real climbing began. Neshoba led them up trails that barely deserved the name. Game paths, water runoff channels, routes that required intimate knowledge of the terrain to even recognize as passable. The horses struggled with the steep grades and loose rock. Several times they had to dismount and lead the animals by hand across particularly treacherous sections where a single misstep would mean a fall of hundreds of feet. Colt's respect for Neshoba grew with each mile. This was her country in a way it could never be his. Every rock, every tree, every turn of the trail held meaning for her. This was not just land to be crossed. This was home written in stone and sky in the particular slant of afternoon light. As the sun reached its zenith and began its slow descent toward the western horizon, they reached a point where the horses simply could not go further. A vertical rock face rose above them, broken only by narrow ledges and cracks too small for anything larger than a mountain goat. "From here we climb on foot," Neshoba said, looking up at the daunting cliff. "The horses must wait." Colt studied the rock face with a cattleman's practical eye. It looked impossible, suicidal even. But then again, so had many things in the past 3 days, and he had survived them all. How long to reach the entrance? 4 hours if we move carefully, 5 if we're very cautious, less if we're willing to risk death. And in the dark? Even more dangerous. One missed handhold and you fall. No second chances on rock like this. "We go now," Colt decided, looking at the angle of the sun. "We have maybe 3 hours of good light left." We climb in the last light, reach the entrance as darkness falls. They secured the horses in a sheltered hollow with access to water and the tough mountain grass. Colt transferred essential supplies to a pack he could carry on his back. The medical kit, ammunition, water, food, everything else stayed with the horses. Then they began the climb. Neshoba moved first, her smaller size and lifetime of experience making her the natural leader. She found handholds and footholds that seemed not to exist until her fingers or toes revealed them. Behind her, Colt climbed with careful deliberation. His years of ranch work had given him strength and endurance. But this kind of technical climbing was new territory. He had to trust completely in Neshoba's route, following exactly where she led. Kane, despite his cavalry background, struggled more than either of them. His boots, designed for riding rather than climbing, found poor purchase on the smooth rock. His military training had not included scaling sheer cliff faces. Twice Colt heard him slip, heard the scatter of stones falling into the void below, heard the scramble of hands desperately seeking grip. But Kane did not fall, did not quit, just kept climbing with grim determination. The sun set as they climbed. The rock face turned gold, then orange, then deep purple as twilight claimed the sky. Stars began to emerge, first a few, then dozens, then hundreds. And still they climbed, moving more by feel than sight as darkness deepened. Colt's hands were bleeding by the time Neshoba called a halt. They had reached a narrow ledge, barely 3 feet wide, that ran along the cliff face. To the left, solid rock. To the right, nothing but air and a drop that would kill instantly. "The entrance," Neshoba whispered, her voice barely audible. "Sound carries strangely in these rocks. We must be very quiet now." They edged along the ledge, backs pressed to the cliff, feet shuffling sideways. Colt tried not to look down at the drop to his right, tried not to think about the darkness below, tried to focus only on the next step and the next and the next and boom. The crack in the rock face appeared so suddenly that Colt almost walked past it, a vertical opening barely wider than a man's shoulders, nearly invisible in the darkness. Neshoba slipped through it as if the stone were water. Kane followed, his leaner frame just fitting. Colt had to turn completely sideways, exhale fully, and force himself through, his chest scraping rock on both sides. On the other side, the passage widened immediately into a narrow tunnel that sloped upward into the mountain's heart. The darkness here was absolute, complete, the kind of dark that made a man question the evidence of his own eyes. Neshoba's hand found Colt's in the blackness, her grip surprisingly strong. "Stay close," she whispered. "The tunnel branches many times. Wrong turn leads to dead ends, or worse, to falls into underground chambers. There are places where one step in darkness means never being found." They moved forward in total darkness, Neshoba leading, Colt following by touch and sound and faith, Kane behind him with a hand on Colt's shoulder. The tunnel was cool, the temperature dropping steadily as they moved deeper into the mountain. Water had carved these passages over countless thousands of years, creating smooth surfaces that offered no grip and unexpected drops that appeared without warning. The passage branched. Neshoba turned left without hesitation. Another branch, this time right. A third branch, straight ahead. Colt lost all sense of direction, lost all sense of time. There was only the darkness and Neshoba's hand guiding him and the sound of their breathing amplified by stone. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 15 minutes, Colt saw light ahead. Faint, barely there, but unmistakably light. The tunnel opened suddenly into a large chamber. Moonlight, filtered through a narrow fissure high in the ceiling, illuminated a scene that stopped Colt's breath. Children, 14 of them, scattered around the cave in various states of rest and wakefulness. Some slept on beds of pine boughs and old blankets. Others sat in small groups, talking in whispers. All of them too thin, all of them carrying the hollow-eyed look of prolonged hunger and fear. The cave itself showed signs of long habitation. A fire pit in the center, currently cold. Bundles of dried plants hanging from rocky protrusions. Crude storage areas built from stacked stones. Water skins hanging from wooden pegs driven into cracks. A boy, perhaps 12 years old, tall for his age and serious-faced, stood watch near the tunnel entrance. When he saw movement in the shadows, he grabbed a stone knife and stepped forward, positioning himself between the threat and the younger children. Then he saw Neshoba, and his stern expression cracked like ice in spring thaw. "Neshoba!" he called out in Apache, his voice thick with emotion. "Maska," she replied, stepping fully into the moonlight. "My son, I came back." The boy, Maska, dropped his knife and ran to her. She caught him despite his size, holding him as if he were 5 instead of 12, her own body shaking with relief. The other children, hearing her voice, came awake. They swarmed around Neshoba, all of them trying to touch her at once, to reassure themselves she was real and not some fever dream born of hope and hunger. Their voices rose in a chorus of Apache, questions and exclamations mixing together in a wave of sound. Colt and Kane held back near the entrance, giving them this moment of reunion. Colt used the time to count faces, matching them against Neshoba's description. 13. He counted again to be sure. 13 children, not 14. Someone was missing. When the initial reunion had settled into something less chaotic, Neshoba began checking each child with practiced efficiency. Her hands moved over them, noting injuries, illnesses, the dangerous weight they had lost in 3 weeks. When she reached a small girl lying on furs in the corner of the cave, her expression changed, tightened with fear. The girl was perhaps 6 years old, her small body too still beneath a threadbare blanket. Even from across the cave, Colt could hear the rattle in her lungs, the wet sound of fluid where there should be only air. "Halona," Neshoba breathed, kneeling beside the child. She placed a hand on the girl's forehead and flinched at the heat radiating from fevered skin. "How long has she been like this?" Maska answered in careful English, his accent precise despite his young age. 3 days of high fever, 4 days of coughing before that. I tried everything you taught us. Willow bark tea for the fever, steam with sage for the lungs, yarrow poultices for the chest. Nothing helps. She grows worse. Colt came forward, medical kit already in hand. "Pneumonia," he said quietly, recognizing the telltale signs from too many field hospitals during the war. "Maybe bronchitis turned severe. Hard to say for certain without proper examination, but the symptoms are clear enough." He opened the kit and selected the quinine tablets, with fingers made steady by necessity rather than confidence. "This will help with the fever. It's not a cure, but it should bring the temperature down enough to give her body a fighting chance." Together they crushed a tablet and mixed it with water. Neshoba lifted Halona's head with infinite gentleness, cradling the sick child against her shoulder. The girl was barely conscious, her small body consumed by fever's fire. But some instinct for survival made her swallow when the bitter medicine touched her lips. As they worked, Colt became aware of the other children watching. Their eyes, huge and thin faces, tracked his every movement with the wary calculation of young things who had learned early that strangers meant danger. He was a white man, an outsider, everything their short, hard lives had taught them to fear and distrust. But he was also helping Neshoba help Halona. The mathematics of trust, calculated in small gestures and the evidence of care rather than harm. Kane stood uncertainly near the tunnel entrance, even more obviously out of place than Colt. His cavalry uniform, stripped of rank insignia but still unmistakably military, marked him as the enemy. Several of the older children had moved to positions where they could reach makeshift weapons. Stones, sharpened sticks, a hunting knife that looked too large for the 10-year-old girl who gripped it with determined hands. Masca, after a long look at Kane that seemed to see right through flesh to intention, said something in Apache to the other children. Whatever it was seemed to ease some of the tension. The children did not relax, but they stopped actively preparing to fight. When Helona had been given the medicine and settled back onto her bed of furs, Neshoba stood and counted heads aloud. 1, 2, 3, she counted in Apache, her voice growing more strained with each number. 11, 12, 13. She turned to Masca, dread written across her face. Where is Kai? A small girl, perhaps 5 years old, with huge dark eyes, stepped forward. Her face was streaked with tears, old ones that had dried and new ones that were beginning to form. He went for water, she said in halting English, each word carefully pronounced. Yesterday morning, before the sun was high, he has not come back. The words fell like stones. A 5-year-old boy, alone in these unforgiving mountains for over a full day and night. The chances of finding him alive were slim. The chances of finding him at all in the vast wilderness were almost none. But Colt saw in Neshoba's face that probability did not matter, that she would search every inch of these mountains rather than leave one child behind, would tear the stone apart with bare hands if that was what it took. The spring, Masca said, guilt thick in his voice. He went to the spring to the west, the closed one only half a mile. I should have gone with him, but Helona was getting worse and someone had to stay. I made him go alone. The terrible burden of responsibility sat heavy on the boy's 2 young shoulders. The weight of choices made it impossible circumstances. You did right, Colt told him firmly. You stayed with the one who needed you most. That's what a leader does. Makes the hard choices and lives with them. He looked at Neshoba. We go find Kai now, you and me. Kane stays here with the children, keeps them safe until we return. Masca looked uncertain, his eyes moving to Kane. This man wears soldier clothes. He did wear them, Colt agreed, but he chose you over the army, chose to help instead of hurt. That counts for something. Kane stepped forward and did something that surprised everyone in the cave. He removed his gun belt, the one piece of equipment that marked him as dangerous, and held it out to Masca. You hold this, Kane said quietly. If I betray you, you have a weapon to fight me. If I don't betray you, then when this is over, I trust you to return it. Either way, you have power over me, not the other way around. It was a calculated risk, a gesture of faith that could easily become a weapon in the hands of frightened children. But Masca, after a moment's consideration, took the belt with grave dignity. I will guard it, he said, and if you prove false, I will use it. Fair enough, Kane replied. Neshoba was already moving toward the tunnel entrance, her body vibrating with the need to find the missing child. The spring is half a mile west of here, she said, rocky terrain. Many places a small child could fall or hide. We must hurry. Night is falling and the temperature drops quickly in these mountains. They left Kane with the 13 children and went back into the tunnels, moving with desperate speed now. Neshoba led them through a different series of passages, navigating by memory and instinct through total darkness. This time she moved faster, her fear for Kai overriding caution. They emerged from a different exit, lower on the mountain and facing west. The last light of day was fading, painting the rocky landscape in shades of purple and deep blue. Stars were emerging, and with them, the cold that lived in mountain nights. Neshoba set off at a pace that was nearly a run, her feet finding purchase on uncertain ground with the sureness of a mountain goat. Colt followed as best he could, his longer legs allowing him to keep pace despite her greater familiarity with the terrain. His lungs burned in the thin air. His legs ached from the day's climbing. The blisters on his feet that Neshoba had treated 3 days ago had torn open again and were bleeding into his boots. But he did not slow, could not slow, because somewhere ahead a 5-year-old boy waited in darkness and cold and fear. And somehow in the past 3 days, these children had become his responsibility as much as Neshoba's. They reached the spring after 20 minutes of hard travel across terrain that would have broken a lesser man's ankle. It was a small but steady flow of water emerging from a crack in the cliff face, forming a clear pool before continuing downhill as a narrow stream. In the fading light, Colt could see small footprints in the mud around the pool. A child's water skin made from a dried gourd lay abandoned on a rock, as if dropped in haste or fear. Kai, Neshoba called, her voice echoing off the rocks. It's Neshoba! I've come back for you. You're safe now. Silence answered her, the kind of silence that makes hope difficult. Then faintly from somewhere to the north, a sound, maybe a whimper, maybe just the wind playing tricks with echoes in desperation. Hard to tell. Neshoba was already moving, following tracks that Colt could barely see, even when he looked directly at them. They led away from the spring, up a steep, rocky slope studded with loose stones that shifted treacherously underfoot. At the top, a narrow fissure in the rock, barely wide enough for a small child to squeeze through, gaped like a dark mouth. Neshoba called into the fissure, her voice gentle now rather than urgent. Kai, little one, it's Neshoba. I came back like I promised. You can come out now. You're safe. This time the answer was unmistakable. A child's voice, weak and frightened, speaking in Apache. Neshoba's face transformed, relief and renewed fear warring for dominance. He's alive, she said to Colt. He says his leg hurts. He can't walk. The Colt looked at the fissure, too narrow for an adult. They could not reach him. He would have to come out on his own. For the next 10 minutes that felt like hours, Neshoba coaxed and encouraged. Her voice stayed calm, reassuring, even as Colt could see the terror in her eyes. The terror that Kai would be too frightened to move, that he would be stuck in that narrow crack of stone until thirst or exposure claimed him. But finally there was movement in the fissure. Slowly, painfully, accompanied by small sounds of distress, a tiny form began to emerge. Kai was small even for 5 years old. Starvation and fear had made him smaller still, a wraith of bone and skin and enormous frightened eyes. His black hair was matted with dirt and blood. His face was streaked with tears and more blood from a cut on his forehead. His right knee was swollen and bloody where he had fallen on the rocks. But worst of all was the look in his eyes, the look of a child who had given up hope, who had prepared himself to die alone in the darkness. When he was clear of the fissure, Neshoba scooped him up, holding him as if she would never let go, as if she could shelter him from everything the world had done and would do to him by the sheer force of her will. Kai buried his face in her shoulder and began to cry. Not quiet tears, but great racking sobs that shook his small body and spoke of terror beyond words. Colt knelt beside them and gently examined the injured knee while Neshoba held the crying child. The joint was badly scraped and bruised, the skin broken and bleeding. But when he carefully probed the bone, Kai's leg seemed intact. No break, just trauma and pain that would heal, given time and care. He cleaned the wound as best he could with water from his canteen, then bandaged it with strips torn from his own shirt. His hands, large and calloused from years of ranch work, moved with surprising gentleness. What happened, little one? Neshoba asked softly when Kai's crying had subsided to hiccups and shuddering breaths. The story came out in fragments, mixed Apache and broken English. Kai had come to fetch water as he did every day, the routine task that kept the children alive. But he had heard soldiers talking nearby, men's voices, the harsh sound of English, the clink of metal and leather that meant cavalry. Frightened beyond rational thought, he had tried to hide in the fissure. In his haste and panic, he had fallen, injuring his knee on the rocks. The pain had been so sharp and sudden that he had cried out before he could stop himself. Then he had frozen in terror, certain the soldiers would hear, would find him, would take him away or kill him or do any of the terrible things children whispered about in the dark. But no one came. The voices faded, and Kai found himself trapped in the narrow crack, unable to climb out with his injured knee, unable to call for help for fear of who might hear. So he had waited, through the heat of the day, through the cold of the night, through another day's heat and another night's cold, waiting for death or rescue, whichever came first. Brave boy, Colt told him, his voice rough with emotion he did not try to hide. Very, very brave. But now we need to get you back to the others, back to Maska and Halona and everyone who's been waiting for you. He fashioned a sling from his bandana, the red cloth that had been Sarah's, settling Kai against his back where the child could ride without having to use his injured leg. Kai weighed almost nothing, a fact that made Colt's jaw tighten with anger at a world that starved children for the crime of being born the wrong color. They started back toward the caves, moving more slowly now with Kai's added weight. The child fell asleep against Colt's shoulder within minutes, exhausted by pain and relief. Colt felt the small body go limp, felt the trust implicit in that surrender to sleep. A child who had every reason to fear white men, who had been taught by bitter experience that white soldiers meant death and suffering, but who now slept peacefully against a white man's back because Neshoba trusted him, and therefore the child did too. The mathematics of trust, building from person to person like stones stacked to form a wall. They had covered perhaps half the distance back to the caves when Colt heard something that turned his blood to ice water in his veins. Gunfire, distant but unmistakable. The sharp crack of rifles echoing off stone, coming from the direction of the caves where they had left Cain and 13 children. Neshoba's eyes met his in the darkness. No words needed. They both knew exactly what it meant. Griffith had found the caves, had brought his men. And now Cain stood alone between children and soldiers, trying to hold a position he could not possibly defend. Colt shifted Kai's weight and began to run despite the darkness, despite the treacherous ground, despite lungs that burned and legs that screamed protest. Neshoba matched him stride for stride, both of them racing toward the sound of violence, and the children caught in its midst. As they drew closer, Colt could make out individual shots now, could hear shouting, could see the flicker of muzzle flashes against the dark mountainside like deadly fireflies. They came around a final outcropping, and the scene unfolded before them in brutal clarity. At least 10 soldiers, maybe more, surrounding the main cave entrance. Rifles raised, taking cover behind rocks, and in the mouth of the cave, a lone figure. Cain standing exposed, his borrowed rifle raised, placing his body between the children and the men who had come to take them. One soldier lay on the ground 30 feet from the cave, clutching his shoulder where blood seeped dark between his fingers. Another crouched behind a boulder, one hand pressed to his face where blood streamed from an eye wound. Cain had made good on his rebellion, had chosen his side and made it costly for those who stood against him. But he could not hold forever, could not stand alone against so many. And somewhere behind him, in the darkness of the mine, 13 children waited to see if the monsters would finally break through. Colt found cover behind a large boulder and carefully lowered Kai into a protected hollow where he would be safe from stray bullets. "Stay here," he told the boy, his voice gentle despite the urgency. "Don't move. Don't make a sound. We'll come back for you very soon." Kai's eyes were wide with renewed fear, but he nodded understanding. Colt checked his Winchester. 6 rounds in the magazine, 20 more in his pocket. Not nearly enough for a sustained firefight against 10 trained soldiers, but enough for what he had in mind. He looked at Neshoba. She had retrieved a hunting knife from somewhere, its blade catching moonlight. Her face showed no fear, only cold determination and a mother's fury at men who would harm children. "Ready?" Colt asked. "Always," she replied. "Together?" "Uchekafo, Osham." They moved toward the battle, toward Cain and the children and the choice that would define everything that came after, the choice between safety and conscience, between survival and sacrifice, between the easy path of walking away and the hard path of standing firm against injustice, the choice that would determine whether 14 children lived free or died in chains, the choice that 3 people, bound by nothing except shared humanity and the belief that some things mattered more than survival, had already made. And as Colt raised his rifle and took aim at the rock sheltering the nearest soldier, he thought of Lily, of what she had believed, of what she had died trying to prove. That understanding could bridge any divide, that every life carried equal worth, that the cycle of violence could be broken by those brave enough to choose differently. He squeezed the trigger, and the night exploded into violence and noise, and the desperate hope that love could prove stronger than hate. "You shot at them?" Jacob breathed. "You fought the army?" Old Colt's expression was grave. "Sometimes, Jacob, doing the right thing means standing against people who have every legal right to be there. But moral right? That's different." And he looked at his weathered hands, remembering the weight of that rifle. 13 children were in that cave, 14 counting Kai, who was still missing. And between them and federal soldiers stood 3 people. Me, your great-grandmother, and Cain. What happened next? "What happened next," Old Colt said, standing slowly, determined whether those children lived or died, Whether this ranch, this family, this life you're living right now, whether any of it would exist. He picked up the box of silver dollars, but that's a story for tomorrow. The ending. Well, the ending is the most important part, and it deserves to be told when we have time to do it justice. Tomorrow, Jacob groaned. Tomorrow, Old Colt confirmed. Now go. Your mother's expecting you for supper. As Jacob reluctantly left, Old Colt stood alone on the porch looking out at the valley, at the life built from 3 silver dollars and impossible choices. Tomorrow he would tell the boy how it ended, how they won, how 14 children became a family, how $3 bought a legacy. Tomorrow, Morrison Ranch, 1940, the third evening. The autumn air had turned crisp. Old Colt sat wrapped in a thick blanket, the wooden box open on his lap, 3 silver dollars catching the last rays of sunset. Jacob arrived running, breathless. "Grandpa, you promised you'd finish the story." Old Colt smiled. "And I keep my promises. Sit." The boy settled at his feet, eyes bright with anticipation. "When we left off," Old Colt said, "I had just fired the first shot. The siege had begun. 14 children trapped in a cave, surrounded by soldiers. 3 of us standing against an army. Did you win?" "Winning," Old Colt said thoughtfully, "isn't always about who's left standing when the shooting stops. Sometimes it's about what you are willing to sacrifice, what price you are willing to pay." He picked up one of the silver dollars, turning it in the fading light. "This is about the price of freedom, Jacob. The real price, not the $3 I paid at that auction, but what came after. The cost we paid in sweat, in fear, and desperate hope. The battles we fought, not with guns, but with paperwork and prejudice, and the slow grinding machinery of law." "Tell me," Jacob urged. Old Colt nodded, his eyes growing distant once more. "It started with a single rifle shot, the sound reverberating off stone walls like thunder trapped in a canyon. The bullet struck rocks 6 inches from the soldier's head, sending stone fragments flying. The man jerked back with a startled cry, his own rifle clattering against the boulder he sheltered behind. "Federal agent!" Colt shouted, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Cease fire immediately." It was a lie, but a necessary one. In the confusion and darkness, with bullets flying and men frightened, the claim might buy precious seconds. Those seconds could mean the difference between life and death. The shooting paused, not stopped, but hesitated, men uncertain, looking to their commander for orders. And their commander was Colonel Griffith, standing 30 yards back from the fighting, his face a mask of cold fury in the moonlight. "That's Colt Morrison," Griffith shouted. "He's no federal agent. He's a deserter and a traitor. Shoot him." But the hesitation had given Colt time to reach better cover. He dove behind a rock formation, Neshoba following like his shadow. From this position, they had a clear view of the cave entrance and Kane's exposed position. Kane had used the break in firing to pull back slightly into the cave mouth, where stone offered some protection. But he was still pinned, still alone, still facing impossible odds. "Kane," Colt called, "how many children mobiles?" "Bile." "All but one," Kane shouted back. "Halona's too sick to move. The others can walk if we need to evacuate." Colt's mind raced through tactical possibilities. 13 children who could move, 1 who could not. Kane himself in Neshoba against at least 10 soldiers. The hidden western entrance offered an escape route, but reaching it meant a dangerous climb through passages the children had never navigated before. Before he could formulate a plan, a new voice cut through the standoff. "Enough of this madness." General Marcus Crook rode into the clearing on a gray stallion, flanked by 15 cavalry troopers in crisp uniforms. Even in the darkness, his presence commanded immediate attention. At 58, he carried himself with the bearing of a man who had spent 4 decades earning respect rather than demanding it. Griffith spun, shock breaking through his military composure. "General Crook, what are you doing here? This is my operation." Crook dismounted with deliberate slowness, his movements conveying displeasure more effectively than shouting ever could. "Your operation?" he said quietly, but his voice carried to every man present. "Is that what you call surrounding a cave full of children with armed soldiers?" "They're not children, they're future warriors," Griffith protested. "I have orders to return all Apache to the reservation." "Orders? Crook repeated, his tone making the word sound like an obscenity. Let me tell you about orders, Colonel. 3 days ago, I received a telegram from Catherine Blackwood, a respected rancher and citizen. She informed me that you were planning to use military force against orphaned children. Children, Griffith. Not warriors, not hostiles. Children aged 5 to 12. He stepped closer to Griffith, his voice dropping to a tone that was somehow more threatening than anger. I also received a rather interesting report about an incident at the San Carlos mission 8 months ago. Would you care to guess what that report contained? Griffith's face went pale in the moonlight. That incident was investigated and closed, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. It was buried, Crook corrected. There's a difference, but I had it reopened. I spoke to witnesses, including several Apache survivors who watched a 16-year-old girl teaching children to read get shot by your men. He turned to address the assembled soldiers. Private Lucas Webb, step forward. Webb emerged from behind a rock, his young face a mask of misery and shame. Tell me what happened that day at the mission, Crook commanded. Webb's voice shook as he spoke. We received orders that Apache raiders were using the mission as a staging ground. Colonel Griffith ordered us to fire on sight. When we arrived, there were people inside. I saw movement. I fired. It was a girl, Lily Morrison. She was holding a book, not a weapon. There were children with her, Apache children, learning to read. The words fell like stones into deep water, creating ripples of shock among the assembled soldiers. And what did Colonel Griffith order you to do after? Crook asked. He told us to file reports, saying we had been fired upon first, that we had returned fire in self-defense. He said if we didn't, we'd all be court-martialed for killing civilians. Griffith found his voice. That's a lie. The private is trying to save himself from desertion charges. Is it? Crook said. Because I have signed statements from 4 other soldiers who were there that day, all saying the same thing, all afraid to speak up until now because you threatened them. He pulled papers from his coat. I also have this executive order from President Grant issued 6 months ago that I've been authorized to implement. It establishes the family placement program. Apache children can be placed with the approved guardians rather than forced into boarding schools, provided certain conditions are met. Hope flared in Colt's chest, bright and painful. Crook continued, his eyes moving to Colt and Neshoba. Morrison. You own 160 acres, correct? Homesteaded? Improved up? Yes, sir, Colt called back. And you're married to this woman? Legally married? Not yet, sir, but we plan to be. Crook's expression did not change, but something in his eyes suggested this was not the answer he had hoped for. Then we have a problem. The family placement program requires married couples for multiple children. The reasoning being that 2 parents can provide better stability than 1. He looked at Griffith. However, given the circumstances, I'm willing to make an exception. Provided Morrison and Miss Neshoba are married within the next 48 hours, and provided they meet all other requirements, I will authorize the placement of these 14 children in their care. You can't do that, Griffith protested. Those children are Apache. They belong on the reservation. Those children, Crook said, his voice hardening, are orphans, and I have full authority under the Indian Reorganization Act to determine their placement, which means, Colonel Griffith, that you are relieved of this operation effective immediately. On what grounds? On the grounds that I receive reports of an officer planning to use military force against children. On the grounds of falsifying official reports. On the grounds of ordering soldiers to fire on civilians. Should I continue? Griffith's hand moved toward his sidearm, a reflexive gesture born of 30 years of solving problems with force. Crook's voice cracked like a whip. Touch that weapon and I'll have you in irons before you clear leather. The 15 cavalry troopers Crook had brought shifted their rifles slightly, not quite pointing them at Griffith, but making it clear where their loyalties lay. Griffith's hand fell away from his gun. You're making a mistake, he said, but defeat had crept into his voice. Those children will grow up to be warriors. Will kill white settlers, and their blood will be on your hands. Maybe, Crook agreed. Or maybe they'll grow up educated, able to bridge both worlds, able to choose peace over war. I'd rather take that chance than condemn them for crimes they haven't committed yet. He turned to his men. Sergeant Williams, escort Colonel Griffith to Fort Whipple. He is to be confined to quarters pending investigation. As two troopers moved to flank Griffith, the colonel's eyes found Kane standing in the cave entrance. "You too," Griffith said quietly. "You're going to let him do this?" Kane met his father's gaze steadily. "You taught me to follow orders, sir, but Mother taught me to follow my conscience. Today, I choose her way." Something broke in Griffith's face. The military mask crumbled, revealing the broken man beneath. For just a moment, he looked every one of his 56 years and then some. "Your mother," he said, his voice barely audible. "She would have liked this, would have wanted me to do better. I failed her. Failed you. Failed everyone." He looked at Crook. "I'll go peacefully. I'm done fighting." As Griffith was led away, his shoulders bowed, his steps heavy, Colt felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just a profound sadness for a man who had let grief and guilt twist him into something he never meant to become. When the sounds of horses faded, Crook approached Colt and Neshoba. "Now then, we need to discuss the practical matters. Morrison, you said you're not yet married?" "We've known each other 4 days, sir," Colt said. "Haven't exactly had time for a wedding." Crook's mouth twitched in what might have been a smile. "4 days, and you're ready to take responsibility for 14 children?" "Yes, sir." "Why?" It was a simple question, but it demanded a real answer. Colt thought about Lily, about the $3 silver, about the look in Neshoba's eyes when she spoke of protecting children no one else wanted. "Because my daughter believed every person deserved dignity and opportunity. She died trying to prove it. If I can help these children have a future, then her death means something. Then she didn't die for nothing." Crook studied him for a long moment. "Fair enough. Here's what needs to happen. You and Miss Neshoba need to be legally married within 48 hours. You need to file formal adoption papers for all 14 children. And you need to understand that this won't be easy. Many people will oppose this, will make your lives difficult." "We understand," Neshoba said, speaking for the first time since Crook arrived. Crook's eyes shifted to her. "You're Apache. Under current law, you have no legal rights, no standing. Technically, Morrison here will own you as his wife." Neshoba's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "I know your laws. I accept this to protect the children." "And the law is unjust," Crook said bluntly, "but it's what we have to work with. Morrison, I trust you to treat this woman with the respect she deserves." "I bought her freedom with $3, Colt said. "I'm not about to take it away now." $3? Crook repeated, curiosity flickering across his face. "Long story, sir." "I imagine it is." Crook pulled more papers from his coat. "These are the guardianship documents. You'll need to bring them to Fort Whipple within 3 days, signed by both of you and witnessed by a minister or judge. Once filed and approved, the children become your legal wards for 1 year. After that, you can apply for full adoption." He paused. "One more thing. The sick child, Helona, I believe." "Yes, sir," Colt confirmed. "Pneumonia, we think. High fever. Difficult breathing. I have a doctor with my company, former Army surgeon. I'll send him up to examine her. If she needs to be transported to Fort Whipple for treatment, we can arrange that." "Thank you, sir." Crook remounted his horse. "I'm doing this because I believe it's right, but also because I'm tired of fighting wars that don't need to be fought. Tired of seeing children orphaned by violence that serves no purpose except perpetuating more violence. If this experiment fails, it sets the program back years, so don't fail." "We won't, sir." "See that you don't." With that, Crook and most of his troopers departed, leaving only the doctor and 2 soldiers to assist. The doctor was a compact man in his 40s named Samuel Winters. He examined Helona with gentle efficiency while the other children watched warily. "Pneumonia, as you suspected," Winters confirmed, "complicated by malnutrition and exposure. She needs rest, warmth, proper food, and continued medication. The quinine should help, but she also needs willow bark for pain and fever, and honey if you can get it to soothe the cough." He left a supply of medicines and instructions for their use. After the soldiers left, taking the 2 wounded men with them, silence fell over the cave. The kind of silence that comes after storms, when people are too exhausted and overwhelmed to speak. Then Masca approached Colt, carrying Kane's gun belt. "You keep your promise," the boy said in careful English. "You protect us, so I return this." He held out the belt to Kane, who took it with visible emotion. "Thank you," Kane said simply. Maska studied both men for a long moment. "Neshoba trusts you, so we trust you. But if you break this trust, we remember. We may be children, but we not forget." "We won't break it," Colt promised. The boy nodded, accepting this, then returned to the other children. Neshoba came to stand beside Colt. "So," she said quietly, "we marry in 2 days?" "If you're willing." "I'm willing, but not just for papers. Not just for children." She looked up at him, her amber eyes reflecting firelight from the small blaze someone had started in the cave. "4 days ago, I would have killed you if given chance. Now I would trust you with my life, with these children's lives. How does this happen so fast?" Colt thought about it. Maybe it doesn't happen fast. Maybe it happens exactly as fast as it needs to. We don't have the luxury of time. Can't court for months or years like people in easier circumstances. We have to decide now, trust now, commit now, and we do it based on actions, not words. "Your actions say you are a good man," Neshoba said. "Better than most I have known. Your actions say you're the strongest person I've ever met, and the bravest." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the children settle for the night, watching Kane help Maska distribute blankets, watching the older ones comfort the younger, watching a family form from the raw materials of loss and hope. $3, Neshoba said suddenly. "That is what you paid for me. What strange price. Too small to matter, too large to forget." "It was all I had," Colt said. "My last money until the cattle sale. I was going to buy supplies, salt, coffee, ammunition, the things that keep a man alive. You chose my life over your supplies. Why?" "Because supplies can be replaced, lives can't." Neshoba took his hand. Her palm was calloused from hard work, her grip strong. "Tomorrow we go to Prescott. Find minister, get married. File papers. Make this official in white man's law. And after? After we build life. For us, for children. We teach them to read, to write, to think. We teach them Apache ways and white ways. We give them choice we never had." "It won't be easy," Colt warned. "People will object, will make trouble." "Well, let them try," Neshoba said, and in her voice was the steel that came from surviving things that would break lesser people. "I protect these children through 3 weeks alone in mountains. I protect them through sickness and hunger and fear. I can protect them through angry white people who think they know better." Colt smiled despite everything. "Remind me never to get on your bad side." "Too late. You already were on bad side. Then you bought me. Then you trusted me. Then you helped me. Now you on good side. Stay there." The next morning they made plans. Kane would stay with the children while Colt and Neshoba rode to Prescott. The journey down the mountain was easier than the climb up, though Neshoba insisted on checking every landmark, making sure they could find this place again if needed. They reached the horses by midday. Ember whinnied when she saw Colt, clearly relieved to see her human again. They rode hard, making the trip to Prescott in just over a day. The town looked different to Colt now. When he had left it 4 days ago, he had been a man with nothing to live for, going through motions out of habit rather than purpose. Now he returned with everything to live for. A woman he loved, 14 children who needed him, a future that looked nothing like the past but held more hope than he had felt in 8 months. Kate Blackwood was waiting when they arrived at her ranch on the outskirts of town. She took one look at Colt and Neshoba and broke into a wide smile. "I knew it," she said. "The moment I heard what happened at that auction, I knew you'd do something crazy." "You sent the telegram to Crook," Colt said. It was not a question. Someone had to. Griffith was planning to use the mission incident to justify a campaign against Apache children. Couldn't let that stand. She turned to Neshoba. "I'm Kate, Colt's half-sister. Same father, different mothers. He got the steady temperament. I got the stubbornness." Neshoba studied her carefully. "You help us?" "Already have been. Got the minister lined up for tomorrow. Got a lawyer named Abraham Finch ready to handle the adoption papers. Got supplies ready to take back to those children. Food, blankets, medicine, everything you'll need." "Why?" Neshoba asked. "Why help Apache children?" Kate's expression turned serious. Because 20 years ago, I was married to a man who beat me near to death, left me for dead in a ditch outside town. An Apache woman found me, took me to her camp, nursed me back to health even though her people had every reason to hate white folks. She saved my life. She met Neshoba's eyes. I can't repay that debt to her. She died 5 years back. But I can pay it forward, can help you and those kids. Figure that's what she would have wanted. Neshoba nodded slowly. Then we accept help, with gratitude. The wedding took place the next afternoon in Kate's parlor. The minister was an older man named Reverend Thomas, who had served as a missionary among the Apache for 15 years and spoke the language fluently. I'll conduct the ceremony in both English and Apache, he said, so both your peoples are honored. It was a simple ceremony, no fancy dress for Neshoba, though Kate had offered to loan her one. Instead, she wore her deerskin dress, cleaned and mended, her hair in traditional braids adorned with new feathers Kate had given her. The 3 red marks on her face had been repainted fresh that morning. Colt wore his best shirt, the one he saved for town trips, and the red bandana that had been Sarah's. Wearing it felt right somehow. Sarah would have approved of this, would have loved Neshoba's fierce spirit and protective love for the children. Kane stood as witness, along with Kate and the lawyer Finch. Sam Redwood from the trading post came too, and a few other townspeople who had known Lily and respected what Colt was trying to do. When Reverend Thomas asked Colt to state his vows, Colt spoke from the heart. I promise to honor you as my equal, to never claim ownership of your spirit, to stand beside you, not above you, to help you protect these children we've chosen to make our family, and to love you not despite who you are, but because of it. Neshoba's vows were equally simple. I promise to trust you with my life and the lives of these children, to teach you Apache ways as you teach me white ways, to stand beside you when trouble comes, and it will come, to build with you a life that honors both our peoples, and to love you because you see my humanity when others see only my race. Reverend Thomas smiled. By the power vested in me by the territory of Arizona, and by the grace of God who makes no distinction between peoples, I pronounce you husband and wife. What God has joined, let no man separate. They sealed it with a kiss, brief, gentle, but carrying the weight of commitment that went far beyond legal documents. Afterward, Kate brought out a simple meal. Bread, cheese, dried fruit, coffee. They sat around her table, this strange collection of people bound together by belief in something better than the world they had been given. As they ate, Finch explained the legal process in detail. The guardianship papers need to be filed at Fort Whipple within 3 days. Both of you sign, I witness. Then it goes before a review board of 3 officers. They'll ask questions, inspect your property eventually. Make sure you can actually care for 14 children. What are the chances they deny it? Colt asked. Finch hesitated. With Crook's backing, good chance of approval. Without it, almost none. Too many people don't want to see Apache children placed with white families. Think it sets bad precedent. But we're not a white family, Colt pointed out. We're a mixed family, which makes it worse in some people's eyes, Finch said bluntly. You need to prepare for opposition, for people making your lives difficult. We are prepared, Neshoba said quietly. We have been preparing our whole lives. They spent the night at Kate's ranch. The next morning, they rode to Fort Whipple with the signed and witnessed papers. The review board consisted of 3 officers, a major, a captain, and a lieutenant. They sat behind a long table in an office that smelled of tobacco and old paper. The major, a heavy-set man with gray mutton jaw, studied the documents with obvious skepticism. 14 children, he said. That's a significant responsibility. Yes, sir, Colt agreed. And you've been married less than 48 hours. Yes, sir. Most couples wait years before having children. You're starting with 14. Unusual circumstances, sir. The major set down the papers and looked directly at Neshoba. You, Apache woman, you understand that by Apache custom, children belong to the tribe, that you're violating your own people's ways by agreeing to this. Neshoba met his gaze without flinching. I understand that 14 children have no tribe. Their parents are dead, their villages destroyed, by white soldiers following white orders. Now white law says they must go to schools that will beat the Apache out of them. I choose different path. Teach them to be Apache and American. Give them choice. And if they choose to become warriors, to fight against us, then they make that choice as adults with full understanding of consequences, not as children forced into it by anger and hate. The captain, younger and less hostile, leaned forward. Morrison, why are you doing this? Really? Not the official reason, the real one. Colt thought about the question. My daughter believed every person deserved a chance. She died trying to prove it. These children deserve a chance too. Someone needs to give it to them. Might as well be me. The three officers conferred in whispers. Minutes passed. Colt felt Neshoba's hand find his under the table, her grip tight. Finally, the major spoke. Application approved. Conditional guardianship for 1 year. You'll be subject to quarterly inspections. Any sign of mistreatment, neglect, or the children being taught to hate America, and they'll be removed immediately. Understood? Understood. It is, Colt said, relief flooding through him. One more thing. The sick child, Helona. Dr. Winters reported she needs continued medical care. You'll need to bring her to the Fort Hospital once a month for examination until she's fully recovered. We can do that. See that you do. They left Fort Whipple with the approved documents clutched in Colt's hand. Official, legal, real. We did it, Neshoba said as they rode away. The children are ours. For 1 year, Colt cautioned. We have to prove we can do this. We will prove it. We will show them that love is stronger than hate, that understanding is stronger than fear, that these children can grow up to be bridges between worlds instead of warriors against each other. They stopped at the trading post on the way back to Kate's ranch. Sam Redwood helped them load supplies. More food, more medicine, clothes for the children, books so they could continue learning. As Sam packed the last of the supplies, Lucas Webb appeared in the doorway. Morrison, he said quietly, can I speak with you? Colt stepped outside with him. Webb looked terrible, hollow-eyed, haunted. The weight of guilt was eating him alive. I heard what you did, taking in those kids, after what I did to your daughter. What about it? I want to help. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, don't deserve a second chance, but I want to help anyway. Need to do something good to balance out the bad. Colt studied him. You understand this won't be easy? That people will make trouble? I don't care. I need to do this. Need to prove to myself that I'm not just a killer, that I can be something better. All right, Colt decided. We can use an extra hand, ranch work, building additional shelter for the kids, hunting, whatever needs doing. Webb's face transformed. Thank you. You won't regret this. See that I don't. They returned to the mountains 3 days after leaving. The journey back was easier, the trail familiar now. When they finally climbed the last stretch and entered the cave, 14 faces looked up with hope and fear mixed together. Colt held up the papers. It's official. You're all Morrisons now. For 1 year, then permanently if all goes well. The children did not cheer, did not celebrate. They had learned too young that good things were usually temporary, that hope was dangerous. But Masca stepped forward and offered his hand to Colt in the white man's way. Then we are family, he said solemnly. Colt shook his hand. We are family. Over the following weeks, they established a routine. Colt and Kane built additional shelters near the main ranch house. Lucas Webb proved true to his word, working from dawn to dusk without complaint. Kate sent supplies regularly. Dr. Winters made the long ride up to check on Helona twice, pronouncing her on the mend. Neshoba taught the children Apache traditions in the mornings. Stories, songs, the old ways of reading the land and sky. In the afternoons, Colt taught them English, mathematics, reading. The children absorbed it all with the desperate hunger of young minds too long starved for knowledge. 3 months passed, then 6. The quarterly inspections came and went without incident. The children grew stronger, healthier, began to laugh more easily, began to trust that this might actually last. On a cool evening in late spring, Colt and Neshoba sat on the porch of their home, watching the children play in the yard. Masca was teaching the younger ones to track. Helona, fully recovered, was helping Chenoa practice her English. Kai was working with the horses, his injured knee now just a memory. $3 silver, Neshoba said softly. That is what started all this. Best investment I ever made, Colet replied. You bought my freedom, then you gave it back. Then you married me. Now we have 14 children and more work than two people should attempt. Regret it? Not for one moment. She leaned against him, and he put his arm around her shoulders. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if you had not been at that auction, if you had not had $3, if you had chosen to walk away. I think about that too, Colt admitted. Think about how different everything would be, how I would still be dead inside, how you would probably be dead outside, how these children would be scattered or worse. $3, Neshoba repeated, such small amount to buy such large change. It wasn't the money, Colt said. It was the choice to see a person instead of a problem, to offer help instead of harm, to choose hope over despair. Your daughter taught you this? She tried. Took me 8 months in meeting you to finally learn it. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and gold. Below them, the valley stretched green and peaceful. Behind them, their home stood solid and strong. Around them, children laughed and played and grew. Somewhere in the gathering darkness, a coyote called. An owl answered, the ancient sounds of a land that had seen peoples come and go, rise and fall, hate and love and everything between. But here, on this small piece of earth, 14 children had found family. 2 people had found purpose. And the cycle of violence had been broken, at least for this one moment, by the simple choice to care. $3 silver, the price of a life, the seed of a family, the beginning of something that would echo through generations. And as Colt Morrison sat with his Apache wife, watching over children who carried both their people's blood and neither's hatred, he thought that maybe, just maybe, Lily had been right all along. Understanding could bridge any divide. Every person deserved dignity. The world could be changed one choice at a time, one life at a time, $3 at a time. The stars came out. The children went to bed. Colt and Neshoba remained on the porch, guardians of a fragile peace, builders of an impossible dream. And the future, uncertain but hopeful, stretched before them like the road they had traveled. Long, difficult, dangerous, but worth every step, worth everything, worth $3 silver and a lifetime of love. 5 years later, the Morrison Ranch had become something remarkable. What started as 160 acres and 2 desperate people had grown into a thriving community. The original 14 children ranged now from 10 to 17. All of them could read and write in both English and Apache. All of them knew their heritage and wore it with pride. Masca, at 17, had been accepted to a teacher training program in Phoenix. He would become the first Apache certified to teach in Arizona public schools. His dream was to return and establish a school that honored both cultures. Helona, at 11, shadowed Dr. Winters whenever he visited. She had a gift for healing and a passion for medicine that reminded Colt of Neshoba. Perhaps someday she would become the doctor that Winters believed she could be. Kai, at 10, had become the best horseman Colt had ever seen. His small size and gentle nature made him perfect for training horses that others had given up on as too wild. The others were finding their own paths. Some loved farming, some loved books, some loved working with their hands. But all of them were choosing their futures instead of having futures chosen for them, and additional families had joined them over the years. The Garcia family from New Mexico, the Chengs from California, the Johnsons, a freed black family from Texas. The Morrison Ranch had become a place where people who did not fit elsewhere could find home. 10 years later, 1890, the transformation was complete. From a single ranch house in 160 acres, the Morrison property had grown into a thriving community of 300 acres. 10 log cabins dotted the valley, each one home to a family that had found refuge when nowhere else would take them. Colt Morrison, now 50 years old, stood on the hill overlooking it all. His hair showed more silver than brown now. Deep lines creased his face, but his eyes remained clear and purposeful. In the largest cabin at the valley's center, Masca Morrison, now 27, stood before 30 students. His teaching certificate, earned 2 years ago in Phoenix, hung on the wall. He was the first Apache ever certified to teach in Arizona public schools. In English and Apache both, Masca told his mixed class of white, Mexican, Apache, and black children, "We will learn mathematics, Who can tell me? If you have $3 and you buy freedom, how much do you have left? A small Mexican girl raised her hand. You have everything, Teacher Masca. Masca smiled, thinking of the story he'd heard 100 times. Exactly right, Rosa. Across the valley in the newly constructed clinic, Helena Morrison worked alongside Dr. Winters. At 21, she wore a crisp white apron over her traditional Apache dress, her medical bag filled with both laudanum and yarrow, quinine and sage. A pregnant woman lay on the examination table, breathing hard. The baby is coming early, Winter said. We'll need to... I have it, Helena said calmly, her hands already moving with the practiced confidence of someone who had delivered 30 babies in the past year. Western medicine and Apache healing wisdom flowed together through her fingers. The baby was born healthy 20 minutes later. In the training corral, Kai Morrison worked with a wild Mustang that 3 other trainers had given up on. At 20 years old, his small frame, once a source of childhood shame, had become his greatest asset. Horses trusted his light touch. Easy, Kai murmured in Apache, then in English. Nobody's going to hurt you. We're friends here. The Mustang's ears flicked forward, listening. Ranchers from 3 territories sent their most difficult horses to Kai. Not because he broke them, but because he understood them. Because he spoke their language and they spoke his. That evening, as the sun set in shades of orange and gold, a wagon approached the ranch entrance. Colt walked down to meet it. 5 people climbed down, dusty and exhausted. A Mexican man and woman, 3 small children, clinging to their mother's skirts. Senor Morrison, the man asked hesitantly. We heard, that is, people told us, you help families who have nowhere else? Colt saw the fear in their eyes, the desperate hope, the same look he'd seen on Neshoba's face 15 years ago, on 14 orphaned children, on dozens of families since. What's your name? Colt asked. Eduardo Reyes, senor. My wife Carmen. Our children. Can you work? Si, I am carpenter. Carmen sews. We work very hard, senor, very hard. Colt held up a hand. We have an empty cabin that needs furniture. Think you can build what's needed? Eduardo stared. You give us house? Work? Nothing's free, Colt said. You work, you contribute, you help your neighbors. But yes, you can stay. Carmen began to cry. Eduardo gripped Colt's hand with both of his, unable to speak. Neshoba emerged from the main house, now 43 years old, her black hair threaded with silver, but her eyes as fierce as ever. She took one look at the Reyes family and smiled. Come, she said in fluent Spanish, I will show you to your home. As the family followed her, Eduardo turned back to Colt. Why do you do this, senor? Why help strangers? Colt thought about $3 silver, about a woman on an auction platform, about choices that echoed through time. Because 15 years ago, he said quietly, someone chose to help me when I didn't even know I needed it. I'm just paying it forward. That night, Colt and Neshoba sat on their porch as they did every evening, watching the lights come on in 10 houses scattered across the valley. Another family, Neshoba observed. Another chance, Colt replied. Below them, the valley thrived. 50 families, nearly 200 people of every background, lived together in the community they had built. The community that started with $3 silver in the choice to care. Mosca's school taught 60 children to read in 2 languages. Helena's clinic had delivered 43 babies and saved countless lives. Kai's horses carried riders across 3 territories. And every single one of the original 14 children had found their purpose, their path, their place in a world that had once told them they didn't belong. $3 silver, Neshoba murmured, leaning against her husband. Best money we ever spent, Colt agreed, putting his arm around her. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell and stars emerged, guardians of the impossible dream they had built together. The dream that proved Lily Morrison had been right all along. On this particular evening, Colt stood in his expanded workshop, teaching young Diami the basics of carpentry, when Kate arrived with unexpected news. Washington approved the program, she announced, waving a telegram. The Family Placement Act is now national law. They're using your ranch as the model. Colt set down his tools, stunned. Our ranch? As a model? Your ranch, Kate confirmed, where children of different races and backgrounds grow up together, learn together, build together. They want to replicate it across the country. Will it work? Colt asked. What we have here is special. Can't just copy it and expect the same results. Maybe not, Kate agreed, but it's a start, better than what came before. That night, as Colt lay beside Neshoba in their bed, he told her the news. They want to use us as a model, he said. Want other families to try what we've done. Will they succeed? Some will, some won't. But at least they're trying. At least someone in Washington believes children deserve better than boarding schools and forced assimilation. Neshoba was quiet for a long moment. Your daughter would be proud. What you have built here. What we have built. Our daughter, Colt corrected gently. Lily belongs to both of us now, just like these children do. Our daughter, Neshoba agreed. She rolled onto her side, looking at him in the lamplight. Do you ever regret it? The $3, everything that came after? Not once, you? Never, but sometimes I wonder what that version of me would think. The woman on that platform, angry, broken, ready to buy rather than submit, if she could see what her life became. What would she think? She would think it impossible, would think no white man could be trusted, would think love between Apache and white was fantasy, would think children from different worlds could never become family. Neshoba smiled. She would be wrong about everything, and I am glad she was wrong. Colt pulled her close. $3 bought your freedom, but you gave me mine. Freedom from grief, from guilt, from the belief that my daughter's death had to be meaningless. We freed each other, Neshoba said. That is how it should be. Outside, an owl called. Inside, children slept peacefully, and two people who should have been enemies held each other and dreamed of futures where their children's children would not have to fight the battles they had fought, where understanding would be common instead of rare, where love would bridge divides instead of hatred widening them, where $3 would be remembered not as the price of a person, but as the seed of hope that grew into something beautiful and lasting and true. And in the morning when the sun rose over the Morrison Ranch, it would shine on a place where the impossible had become real, where 14 children had become a family, where two people had become one, where $3 had bought not a life, but a legacy of love, of hope, of the stubborn, impossible, beautiful belief that people could be better than their worst impulses, that the world could change, that it had to change, that they would change it one child at a time, one choice at a time, one act of radical compassion at a time, until the day when no child would be sold, no person would be property, no life would be measured in silver dollars. But until that day came, they would keep working, keep building, keep loving, keep proving that Lily Morrison had been right all along, and that $3 could change the world. Arizona Territory, 1875 to 1940. Colt and Neshoba Morrison raised 14 Apache orphans to adulthood. In 1892, the Masca Morrison School became Arizona's first officially recognized bilingual institution. And in 1895, Dr. Helona Morrison opened the first clinic combining Western and Apache medicine. By 1900, the Morrison Ranch model inspired the National Family Placement Program, offering alternatives to forced boarding school assimilation. By 1910, over 200 families of diverse backgrounds had found home at Morrison Ranch. The original 14 children produced 47 children, 89 grandchildren, and hundreds of descendants who carry forward the legacy of compassion and understanding, all because one man chose to pay $3 for a stranger's freedom and chose to see humanity instead of hatred.